So the price difference between an f1.2 and an f1.4 50mm prime can get pretty steep, or any prime lens for that matter, but is it actually worth it? Today we'll take a look at how a 51.2 compares to a 51.4, side by side, both wide open, and then I'm going to get out and about and take some portraits for a bit of a real world test to see if you can see the difference between the two apertures in a blind test. You pay attention because I'm going to throw in a curveball or two to really test you, so let's get into it. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get Rachel to stand in the same spot and then get some portraits on both the 1.4 and the 1.2 primes. We'll take a close look at the differences, and then I'm going to go out, get some more creative portraits, and we'll do our blind test. So here's our shots on both the 1.4 and the 1.2 prime. And side by side, it is super close in terms of rendering, but the 1.2 shot does look a little bit softer and has a kind of swirling effect to the bokeh that does have a really pleasing look. And this is one of the reasons that it's probably my favorite prime lens that I own. It's just down to the character of this lens. Zooming in, taking a look at sharpness, it is very close, but I think the 1.4 lens is definitely the sharper of the two. And if we take a very close look at the bokeh as well, this is where you can see that difference where the 1.2 lens renders these buildings in the background quite a bit smoother. So those are the differences. They are there, but can you actually see them in the real world when looking at side-by-side portraits? Could you pick out the 1.2? I'm going to show you sets of images side by side, and I want you to tell me which of the shots you think was taken at f1.2. Pause the video if you need to, and also maybe make a list of the images that you think are shot at f1.2, and let me see the list down in the comments. I'd be really interested to see how you all do. So let's find out, is f1.2 worth it in a 50mm prime for portraits? So here's our first set of images, and in this one we've got a bit of foreground bokeh. So which of these shots do you think was taken at f1.2? And this closer in portrait is ridiculously tough. If I couldn't check, I don't know if I would know which one of these was taken at 1.2. All right, so for the close-ups, the image on the right is 1.2. So well done if you got that right, because that is a seriously tough one. And back to our full-length shots, it was the image on the left that was f1.2, which I think is a bit easier. It is given away a little bit by that extra foreground bokeh. All right, now here's some more full-length images, this time with a slightly cleaner background, which I think just makes it so much harder to see any difference between these shots. Okay, so in this set, we've got 1.2 on the left and f4 on the right, so that's your first curveball. The biggest giveaway is definitely the much smoother clouds on the 1.2 shot, which are a lot more in focus and sharp on the f4 image. Not a huge difference really, but the 1.2 image I think does look a bit more dreamy as a result. And on this set, it's 1.2 on the left again. And honestly, it is so tough to see the difference here between these two. I think the only giveaway is that little rock in the background is a bit smoother, I guess, on the 1.2 image. I find that when there's not a lot going on in the out of focus backgrounds, it can be really tough to see the difference between 1.2 and 1.4, so let me know if you got those right. I'm also starting to notice a bit of a consistent difference between these two particular prime across all the images that we've seen so far. That kind of gives away which image is the 1.2 shot. Maybe you've noticed it too, but if not, stick around to the end and I'll reveal what I think I've noticed. Anyway, moving on, here is another close-up portrait, and it is just so hard to see a difference in this kind of shot compared to a full-length portrait, like this second set, which I think actually the difference is a little bit more obvious here. So on the full length, 1.2 is on the right, That building on the right side of the frame really gives it away. It's much smoother on the 1.2 shot. But in a close-up, the 1.2 is on the right, which I simply would only know by checking Lightroom. It is that close. So now here's two shots with a busy background. So this should make it a bit easier to spot which of these was taken at 1.2. So I know I said it was easy to spot it in full length shots, but looking at these actually, it is really hard to spot the difference in my opinion. So it just shows how situational it is. But again, the buildings in the background are a bit smoother on the image on the right, which was shot at f1.2. And in this set, the rocks on the right side of the frame look quite a bit smoother on the 1.2 image, which is shot on the left. But now, what about a classic headshot? Do you reckon you could see the difference? Here's our shots. Do you think one of these was taken at f1.2? But before I reveal, here's a portrait of a cat who is totally judging you for taking so long to figure out which of these shots was taken at f1.2. So in our cat shot, again, it is so close, but it's that tree at the top left, which I suppose is rendered a bit smoother on the image on your right, which was taken at f1.2. I'll be very impressed if you got that one right, because that was a tough one. Back to our headshots, and another curveball here because none of these were taken at f1.2. Let me know if you spotted it. The image on the left is the 1.4 prime stepped down to 2.8, and the image on the right is the 1.2 prime stepped down to f2. So after all these super shallow depth of field portraits, was it obvious that these two headshots were taken at a slower aperture? Here's the f1.2 version of this image anyway, and I did this because I really think for a headshot like this, I personally overwhelmingly prefer how the f2 and the f2.8 images look. Putting the 1.2 headshot next to the f2 headshot, there's just so little of the face in focus on the 1.2 image. I think f2 looks way sharper and quite a bit more professional in my opinion. All right, now to finish off, do you think you could spot the difference in a video clip? Take a look at each of these clips and let me know which one of these was filmed at f1.2. So I think again this is really tough to spot, but it's the f1.2 clip on the left. And it's given away by having a slightly less contrasty out of focus background. So, what did you think? Hopefully that was at least fun, and I'd be really interested to know what you think after that little blind test. How big is the difference between these two primes in reality? And is that difference enough that it would play a factor into which of these two primes you would purchase? So a couple of things that I noticed just going over all these images is that first of all, the 1.2 and 1.4 50mm primes from Canon are actually very different focal lengths in reality, with the 1.2 prime being more like a 55mm and the 1.4 prime is probably slightly wider than 50mm, so it made framing these shots up exactly really difficult. But the main difference that I noticed overwhelmingly was just in the overall contrast between the two. The new 1.4 prime is much more contrasty straight out of camera, and images just look a little bit more crisp, whereas the 1.2 prime has a more soft, low contrast look, which really helps give it that dreamy look. And I also find that it naturally smooths the skin a little bit too. Also, the 1.2 prime definitely renders images just a bit warmer than the 1.4 prime, which is a bit on the cool side. But hopefully this video demonstrates that a lot of these differences in the real world are pretty subtle. So if you're stressing over which of these primes to pick up, I really think you are going to be very happy with either lens for sure. And definitely, I think clients are pretty much never going to be able to tell the difference between these two lenses. For example, my wife, who's in all of these shots, saw me making this video and saw the side-by-sides, and she commented that she couldn't see the difference between the shots at all. Now, I own and love the f1.2 version, and to me these little differences are worth it, but the 1.4 Prime is smaller, it's lighter, and it's slightly cheaper, and it is just fantastic, so it's a great option as well. But let me know down in the comments if you think this f1.2 Prime is worth it, or if you would maybe go with the 1.4 version. Check out the description of the video for a couple of RAW files so you can see the differences for yourself, and also a link to a more in-depth comparison between these lenses that I did recently that covers other things like low light, of course, and autofocus. So if you're interested in that, check it out. Also, let me know if you want me to do this kind of blind test with any other lenses. But anyway, that's it. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you all next time.